going, guys? Nathan and Dylan from LifeBeast. We're here again. So today we want to talk about being basically a self-maintaining unit, or essentially being the most functional you can be. And this is really from a sort of an alignment or a sort of postural perspective. And we're going to go through a number of different sort of ideas and principles behind this that you probably will have heard of, but probably a lot of stuff that you've never really considered as well. So Dylan, do you want to lead us in here?
Sure. So we live in this world that's very anterior dominant. So anterior just means forward. So we're always in positions such as this where the shoulders want to come forward, which can really influence a lot of things in our body, which myself and Nathan will go through. And we're going to look at it from three different perspectives. So it's the way we grow, so obviously being a kid and coming up. What we do on a daily basis, all the lifestyle we live, how we work, and all of those bits and pieces. And the additional things such as sport or exercise and just movement, really, in general. So I'll try not to be too specific, but I really want to get into it. So naturally, because we do live in an anterior-driven society, we're always driving, or we're on our phone, or the stay-at-home mums and dads are always looking after their kids. They're in this position. You're working at a computer. The list goes on. And if you think about what you get up to in daily life, it is usually forward. So this can really, really impact a fair few areas, and we're going to focus on this upper body position, the shoulder, and the influences of the shoulder positioning on the cervical spine, and even the thoracic spine gets involved as well.
And when we say cervical and thoracic spine, we better say that for us playing at home. So your neck is your cervical spine, your thoracic spine is basically that mid-back all the way down to what's known as your lumbar spine or your low back.
So if you think about the way we, just think about it from even high school up. Of course we've had primary school. You're always at your table, you're probably sitting pretty slovenly. Naturally nowadays, well, the kids have the laptop, so you add that in, even we were on our books and whatnot. They get on their break, they're on their iPods or their phones, and they're always in this position. You think about yourself at work, you're always on your computer as well, and you're just rolling these shoulders in. And what that does, I'll turn sideways to show you, what that does is roll these shoulders in. These little pockets through here of muscles get very, very short, which obviously naturally over time, it's just going to stay there. And what this does, and Nathan will go through this more in a second, is it pulls your head forward to compensate for this rolling forward of your shoulder blades come up your back a little bit more, and everything just goes forward. So you'll see a lot of people like this, even on the street, and they're in this position, and Nathan's going to go through what that does to my spine as a compensatory mechanism.
So let's have a quick think about this here. So we're born, or we develop curves within our body. And when we go into this prolonged forward motion position, where our shoulders are rolling in, our body starts to compensate. So our head starts to come forward, and we actually start to straighten this spine through tightening of ligaments and tightening of the tissues around it. What this does is extend the top of the spine, so it lifts us back, and then it flexes, which is the bending forward of that spine there. So you get this big chinge-up motion. You'll see it with a lot of people. Why that's important is, for a start, it's linked to long-term neck pain and stiffness and stuff like that. But we also know for every centimetre our ears come forward of our shoulders, we double the weight in our head on our basically on our neck. So head on, sorry, lost it for a bit there. And you want to think about that. If you've got a 5 kilo head, or like me and Dylan, a bloody 50 kilo head, every centimetre comes forward, it's doubling. So if we come 4 or 5 centimetres forward, we've suddenly got this 200 kilos of pressure, and something else, say 30, 40 kilos of pressure on the base of that neck there. And that's just going to further reinforce things. The more time you spend out there, the worse it's going to get, the weaker those muscles are going to get. The tighter you're going to get through the front, you're just going to keep coming forward. The other thing that's really important to sort of remember about this, and things people really don't think about, is if this head's coming forward and these shoulders are coming forward, in order to maintain stability through the whole body, Dylan's low back and hips have to compensate, so they have to come back. So they have to increase that curve through the bottom there and tend to put more pressure on the low back. This is why we often see, especially in my office, a lot of people that come in complaining of low back pain, but the issues are actually coming from above, or then vice versa as well. They come in complaining of some neck issues, and it's actually coming from below. Alright, so, and that's the same thing, and this is really being reinforced more when we look at, I've seen 2-year-olds with their iPhones and iPads, and they're not holding it out here in a nice functional position. It's always down here. You watch all these kids all the day. So what's our next step on that, Dylan?
So we've kind of looked at how people operate on a daily basis, their lifestyle. Obviously you get a little bit older, you're at school and then you're working. There's those extra bits and pieces that people love, and hopefully it's actually a bit of movement, so a lot of sport. We look at rugby, we look at footy, and then netball and basketball, and everything is usually in this position. Even with respect to some of those sports, it can come from more of a vanity background. So of course, you have to be in a certain physical position, or you have to be in prime
condition.
There we go. Thanks. Prime condition in these sports. So naturally, you're only going to see this point. Nobody really ever looks at their back. So you only ever see this. So you're working, you're doing bench press, push-ups, because you can see this. And what that does is kind of reinforce this position again. So the bit that I mentioned first before, but it's probably the most important now, especially with how technology influences our kids. I don't have kids, but our kids. And how much time parents don't really have anymore to play with their kids, is the fact that, a kid whinges and cries, instead of taking them to the park and playing around with a dog and getting outdoors, you just hand them an iPhone or an iPad. And everybody's seen it, don't get sensitive, everybody does it.
There's nothing wrong with it to a point either.
Not at all. I've done it with my little brother and sister, you just kind of hand it to them and they're happy. But then they sit, and I can't even do it, my spine doesn't even go that way. Kids are obviously a lot more mobile than we are. And they get into this position, their head, and they're usually in this incredibly cramped position that just is so detrimental. And if you look at the amount of stuff that's coming out for kids nowadays and how portable it is, it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse.
And this is right as they're developing too. So you've got growth plates, your bones growing, muscles growing, the whole body's growing, and they're putting themselves regularly into this position, and the body adapts to what it's regularly applied to it. So if this is its constant position, the body's going to create positions that make that more functional, because really the structure of our body governs our ability to function. And if your body thinks that you always need to be in this position, even though it could be completely detrimental to it, and we know that it is, your body's going to respond by making it easier for you. And I think the link that people don't see, or if we think about this, and Dylan will probably agree with me here, if everyone thinks about sort of the position of depression, so Dylan, if I asked you what's the position for depression, where would you sort of put your body?
Well, it's usually eyes down, they don't want to maintain eye contact with anybody. Obviously that puts themselves in their own head, they don't have to deal with the world around them. It's a lot of forward, it's all they're just kind of looking down and they're just in their own little world. It is their own little world all the time.
Yeah. And it's that position, it's basically this exact same position we see with this bad posture. You're forward, you're closed off, you're also closing out your ability to breathe, so you limit your breath, so you get less oxygenation to the body and to the brain anyway. And you curl through. And it just becomes a reinforcing process, because we know in that position, you already making sure that you can't look at people in the eyes, you can't talk to people. So you reinforce that mindset, that mental change. On top of that, anytime you've got that contraction forward, you're going to actually put yourself in a more predisposition to pain, stiffness. If you close out through these shoulder joints here, you start to impinge your nerves, and you'll actually get tingling through the arms and all sorts of potential issues through there. And we already know that chronic pain, which is what this will cause, is linked to further mental health issues. So it becomes this perpetuating cycle, and people really don't see that link. So if you're putting a child from a very young age into a position that they're going to adopt, which is essentially the same position, it's probably not, although there's probably no great links to it right now, it's probably not unreasonable to think that there's probably a great idea that, although we're seeing this huge range of mental health issues, and we're not really sort of linking it back to this.
And something Nathan just mentioned then was obviously with your breathing, and you can't really breathe properly. You think about how that's going to affect you when you sleep, and then of course you don't recover, and everybody knows when they're tired, you're not the happiest person, your body is really quite depleted. And whether you believe in it or not, a huge psychological background for that is that down here is your emotional centre. So if you never take breaths down here and release that kind of emotional anguish, or just whatever you need to release through there, it never goes. And that's why you notice a lot of people with this really pent-up situation up here, they always take really short breaths, they operate really quickly, they breathe like I am now, where I'm not really taking any breaths, but I'm speaking and I'm just thinking about what life's going to do, and I just keep speaking and I just keep thinking, and nobody really takes a breath.
And it's just a cycle. It just cycles into itself and gets worse and worse and worse.
And we look at it from this angle because that's our job, that's what we love, and we look at it as broadly as that. We never expect you to, but just you now having an understanding where you might look at someone and go, wow, that's what it can do in the long run.
And once you get told, you'll start to see it everywhere. If everyone ever thinks that I'm looking at buying this new car, suddenly you see them everywhere. It's the same sort of thing here. And it's really important to start to address this. Like, we're passionate about this. Part of being a life beast, part of doing what we're doing, is to make people as happy and functional as they can be in their lives. So it's important that we address this. And what we're going to be doing following on from here is we want to start giving you some great little tools just to do little maintenance work at home to stop yourself from getting worse if you're already starting to notice you're in this position, and then starting to sort of get yourself into better positions. And this is sort of based around the three principles of a gentleman named Mr. Kelly Starlett, or Dr. Kelly Starlett. Starrett? Yeah, look at me trying to pronounce words.
The Lord of Physiotherapy, functional physiotherapy, amazing.
Absolutely amazing man. Has a book called Becoming a Supple Leopard, which is, everybody should have this book. I use it daily, for both in my practice and out there, and it's easy and sort of well-referenced book to sort of get the body into prime position. But really from the basics, what I want to go through here is he has 3 basic principles for all movement. And they are simply spinal stability, so getting yourself in a stable spine position, which makes perfect sense, which is about not being in that roll forward position partially as well. 2 is the one joint rule, or moving through your primary engines. So in this case, it's talking about maintaining the spine as one joint, and then always moving through the hips, so lumbo, pelvic, and hip complex, and then moving through the shoulders as well. And then finally, it's about creating torque. The stuff we're going to teach you to do at home is really about addressing those first 2. Creating stability and allowing your 2 sort of primary engines to move as best they can.
Yeah.
Anything else to add before we leave up today, Dills?
No, we'll be putting it in future videos, and it's just trying to create a few simple mechanisms to address this, and making you aware of it as well.
Yeah.
That's probably the main thing. And that's pretty
because
much
you can't
it.
address something until you actually decide to be aware of it for yourself. So stay tuned. As always, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and like us on Facebook and sharing with your friends. And make sure you leave any comments of stuff you want to see from future. This has been Nathan and Dylan. Thanks for tuning in at Life Beast. See you guys.